Your daily fix of women's mixed martial arts from the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and one championship. Be in the loop, cause Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your fix on women's MMA with Got You Covered on Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Arnel De Leon. Hopefully you are doing well for yourself, you, your friends, your family, whether you live in the States or internationally. I hope you're doing fine for yourself during a time of uncertainty. Wash your hands, brush your teeth, and get healthier as we talk about UFC 249. So far, everything's going well for UFC 249. It's going to be happening this Saturday at Jacksonville, Florida. And also, it is further announced that we got other MMA events happening in Jacksonville, Florida. And Dana White is saying that by the end of May, we are going to have an event happen in Las Vegas. Now, as of right now, as Dana White just said, that, like in Sports Illustrated, that he wants an event happen May 23rd in Las Vegas, it's still not official. As of this recording, Las Vegas says there will not be any sporting event happening in Las Vegas. Everything is closed down. And as everything is being closed down right now, there is a potential that the NBA could be making a comeback in Florida as well, doing their NBA playoffs, doing their NBA finals in a closed building, in a closed setting, sometime in June. So we can expect a lot of sporting events. We can expect everything when it comes to sporting events be back to normal, probably by end of July or beginning of August is when everything for sure is set in stone. We're all good right there. But for now, though, let's talk about UFC 249. We got a stacked card here. Sadly enough, it was originally going to have Felicia Spencer versus Amanda Nunes, but that fight got rescheduled. Amanda Nunes was scheduled to defend her belt against Felicia Spencer at the upcoming UFC 249 event this Saturday. But this is coming in from MMAfighting.com that Amanda Nunes versus Felicia Spencer is set for June 6th UFC event. The UFC Women's Featherweight Champion will be on the line. A championship will be on the line June 6th as two-division queen Amanda Nunes faces Felicia Spencer. Multiple sources told MMA Fighting and followed a report by ESPN. The UFC has yet to officially announce the June 6th event at its exact location. Even the May 23rd event in potentially Las Vegas, even that event isn't even really set. So, the Lioness, Amanda Nunes, originally was scheduled to defend her belt against Felicia Spencer on May 9 in Sao Paulo, Brazil, but the event was moved to the United States due to the coronavirus pandemic. Nunes eventually decided not to fight, explaining she wanted to let this coronavirus pass a little bit so I can at least have a full camp. Felicia Spencer, who is 8-1, a former Invicta FC Women's Champion, earned a shot at the 145-pound belt after stopping Zara Farron in the first round at UFC Norfolk in February. The Canadian prospect is 2-1 under the UFC banner with a quick submission victory over Megan Anderson, followed by decision loss to Chris Cyborg. Nunes, who is 19-4, is riding a 10-fight win streak, which includes wins over 6 former or future UFC champions: Jermaine Radame, Holly Holm, Chris Cyborg, Valentina Shevchenko, Ronda Rousey, and Miesha Tate. As previously reported from MMA Fighting, the June 6th event also features a bantamweight clash between former title holder Cody Garbrandt versus Rafael Assunção. That card is still unknown as of this very moment there. Cody Garbrandt has gone through a series of injuries among training, so we're unsure if Cody Garbrandt versus Rafael Assunção will be an official thing. Though, for now, we can kind of say that Amanda Nunes versus Felicia Spencer is official on June 6th, despite the fact that we don't know the exact location. Even if it isn't going to be in Las Vegas, it is highly likely the event will happen in Jacksonville, Florida. From moving on from this point on, from UFC 249, we can expect every UFC event to indeed happen. I don't expect another UFC show to go and be cancelled just because off the basis that UFC has location set for Jacksonville, Florida, and considering the fact that the WWE, the pro wrestling company, that company is still pushing shows every single week, 4 shows every single week, actually over 4 shows if you include the WWE Network. Or multiple shows every single week in the Jacksonville, Florida, to which they're recording stuff every single day. Everything's all pre-taped. They have their shows done a month in advance. There's sometimes they're even doing live shows in the Jacksonville, Florida arena, in the Performance Center. So you know what? Everything's all good. Even AEW, All Elite Wrestling, even they're having their shows still continue to press forward among COVID-19 being a huge issue currently in the States. So, Felicia Spencer versus Amanda Nunes is now a thing, though I am very questionable about Amanda Nunes versus Felicia Spencer still happening at the June 6th event here, because on top of Amanda Nunes being unsure about the coronavirus thing being big and being an issue, and that, it's understandable. It is understandable for a person to be wary of COVID-19, worried about coronavirus. Health is the biggest concern. Dana White constantly, every time he's interviewed about COVID-19, he's always saying health and economics are the two most important parts for the fighters as we book events here. All the fighters are being checked up. We got reports from Anthony Smith and Francis Ngannou saying that Dana White himself has been calling the fighters individually and have been telling them and detailing them what to expect from future UFC events and if they are going to be tested. We currently have fighters who are right now being tested for the UFC show. As I am recording this right now, this is a Wednesday, it'll be released on a Thursday. We got fighters coming in about a couple days right before Saturday for the show to happen, and there are currently people right now going to their hotels, being checked up if they are sick, and currently so far there are no reports of any fighter right now being sick, who are currently going to be competing at the UFC 249 show. One fighter was indeed sick who was scheduled originally to be at UFC 249, but that fighter got dropped off. So far, there are no other fighters who are said that they will be competing at UFC 249 who currently have COVID-19, who currently have coronavirus. So Amanda Nunes is saying that she wants to participate when the coronavirus thing dies down. We are unsure when that thing will die down. We can only make estimated guesses. Khabib Nurmagomedov, he speculates, even his trainer and manager speculates, that he'll be able to come back to the States approximately around September time, maybe late August, and that's when the coronavirus issue will be a lot more lessened, it'll be a lot less strict, state-wise and internationally. The one major thing as to why I'm still unsure about Amanda Nunes versus Felicia Spencer happening is because Amanda Nunes over the past 2 years has a tendency of saying no to fights or saying no to schedule events if she's not 100% into it, in the sense that she feels like there could be a nagging injury. It was reported on this past week, actually, that Amanda Nunes has undergone an injury at some sorts during a training camp, that being one reason as to why she did not she says she's not going to go fight Felicia Spencer. But then again, we don't know. We don't know if it's the manager saying, oh man, Amanda Nunes doesn't want to fight because of an injury, or Amanda doesn't want to fight because of coronavirus. We're still definitely unsure about that. We've heard managers lie in the past. We've had fight promoters lie to the past. So we're unsure if Nunes versus Felicia Spencer is still going to truly be happening. It is set for June 6th. But who's to say Amanda Nunes is like, you know what? I don't feel like defending against Felicia Spencer. In a recent interview this past week by Felicia Spencer, where she talks about the problem about being matched up with Amanda Nunes, is the fact that she's continuing on training for a fight she doesn't know that is going to go happen. Felicia Spencer has really no say in this. She really doesn't. Amanda Nunes being a 2-division champion, everything is lined up for her. And here's the thing, Amanda Nunes, unlike Felicia Spencer, she really doesn't need the money. Amanda Nunes, when asked about how she's being seen in terms of a big act, of a person who can draw, of a person who can sell. Here's the thing, Amanda Nunes, on top of making 6 figures per fight, making about $500,000 per fight, and that's not including bonuses, which she always gets a performance night, or knockout the nights, as she has in her past 10 fights, in her 10-fight win streak. Amanda Nunes does commercials. You always see her commercial of her for Modelo constantly. I haven't seen a single promotion of her selling a Modelo product in the past couple months, really. She's also doing a bunch of other side projects, and she's part of other organizations, and she's also going through philanthropy. So really, Amanda Nunes, she has her schedule pretty much booked to the point, and for UFC, she's made so much bank in her time as the UFC champion, and she's still fairly young, that she could pretty much book her own fights, and she can be pretty much set for life in terms of financials. Felicia Spencer? Not really. If Felicia Spencer needs this fight against Nunes, then Nunes needs this fight against Spencer. Because as of right now, 2020, we can easily say Amanda Nunes is arguably the greatest UFC women's fighter of all time, one of the most dominant champions of all of UFC, and currently one of the most dominant fighters right now in the UFC. The closest fighters to have ever taken on Amanda Nunes would have to be Germaine de Randamie, and Amanda Nunes was able to fend her off. I say don't doubt on Felicia Spencer. I've doubted Felicia Spencer in the past, But when I look into her fight against Chris Cyborg, I say, you know what? Felicia Spencer had a really good showing against one of the baddest women in the entire world in Chris Cyborg. And not only that, she didn't get knocked out. She went all the way, multiple rounds. And she was able to defend herself and fight properly against Chris Cyborg, against somebody who was once considered the best women's fighter in the entire world. So when Felicia Spencer versus Amanda Nunes does happen, I'm just going to say right now, it can happen either. We can see Felicia Spencer defeat Amanda Nunes, but Amanda Nunes is a double division champion for a reason, and I can't wait for these two when they do fight. Coming up after the short break here, we'll be covering some more women's MMA news right here at the GSMC MMA podcast.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco, ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And so we talked about Amanda Nunes versus Felicia Spencer. That's going to be a great title fight when it does happen. Now, coming up this upcoming Saturday, though, we got two fighters who are itching their way for a title fight soon, and that is Michelle Waterson versus Carla Esparza. So Michelle Waterson versus Carla Esparza, this will be a very fun matchup here. As usual, though, Michelle Waterson's coming in as the underdog in her matchup against Carla Esparza, and it definitely makes sense. Michelle Waterson did not have an impressive performance against Joanna Jędrzejczyk off the basis that I think she came to the fight with the wrong strategy. So Carla Esparza versus Michelle Waterson here. Carla Esparza is coming in as the favorite to go win this fight, her being a former champion, coming off a 2-fight win streak here. Carla Esparza has all the momentum carrying over onto her fight against Michelle Waterson, and considering the fact that Michelle Waterson had a very questionable performance against Joanna, it makes sense why Carla Esparza would be the favorite going into the fight, coming in at UFC 249, that being the only women's fight in the entire card. I can't wait for that fight. That fight has the potential to be a fight of the night contender here. The entire card is full of a bunch of potential fight of the night contenders, though. So for Michelle Waterson versus Carla Esparza, how do I predict that fight's going to end up, really? See, I'm a firm believer that Michelle Waterson, in terms of skill set, has all the skills and the tools to take on all the fighters in the women's strawweight division. Though the only problem, though, is that Michelle Waterson truly is an MMA fighter in the sense that she has all the skills and tools, but she doesn't really overachieve in any specific category with the exception of her jiu-jitsu game. I'm a firm believer that Michelle Waterson comes into way too many of her fights being billed as the underdog when she really shouldn't be. She has good all-around striking ability, her ground game is really good, her wrestling defense is pretty solid, her jiu-jitsu game is pretty underrated in my personal opinion, though. But when I say Michelle Waterson versus Carla Esparza here, this can definitely go either way here. Carla Esparza is coming in as the favorite. I still predict, though, that Michelle Waterson is going to go and eke out Carla Esparza through 3 rounds of action, and the reason for that is because when it comes stylistically, when it comes to matchups here, I think Michelle Waterson beats out Carla Esparza. Carla Esparza, the biggest knock on Carla Esparza's career is the fact that although she is a phenomenally great wrestler, she's got great ground and pound, she's got great technique in her ground ability, in her wrestling ability, though, she has a tendency of struggling when it comes to boxing in her stand-up game. Yes, in her 2 fights, her striking game has improved significantly. It used to be Carla Esparza would go and bring up her arms out, and she would do the default boxing stance to which she's defending herself. She's not even checking any leg kicks. She's not checking any body shots. She's not checking any kicks at all. She's not stuffing any takedowns. She's gonna go and put her arm up, and she's gonna go and close the distance against her opponent, and she's gonna have a boxing match against her opponent, and she doesn't fare off that well because her boxing ability isn't all that well exceptional. But recently, in her past 2 fights, she has done a much more better job when it comes to closing the distance and doing a better dirty boxing. She's got a better clinch game. She understands how to fight her opponents recognizing distance. Every time in Carla Esparza's fights against someone like Joanna Jędrzejczyk, she has a tendency of fighting the style that's dictated upon her by her opponents. When she fought against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, same thing with Michelle Waterson. Those two have the tendency of struggling. Michelle Waterson and Carla Esparza, when they lose, it's because their opponent is dictating the pace of the fight. When they both fought against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Joanna's biggest strength is out of the pocket boxing. Now, Michelle Waterson can do what Joanna Jędrzejczyk kind of does, in the sense that she can also do out-of-the-pocket boxing. And just what Michelle Waterson was doing versus what Joanna Jędrzejczyk was doing, is that Joanna is a lot more better in out-of-the-pocket poking boxing than Michelle Waterson is. So when Michelle Waterson goes up to fight against Carla Esparza, if she could apply some of the skills and some of the abilities, some of the striking that Joanna did onto Carla Esparza in their fight, then Michelle Waterson can win this fight. And I'm not afraid of Carla Esparza taking down Michelle Waterson, because we've seen in the past here, Michelle Waterson's takedown defense is really good, and her jiu-jitsu ground game is exceptionally very well. And so, if Esparza were to go and take down Michelle Waterson, don't be surprised if Michelle Waterson can go and reverse her way out of there and go for an armbar, or go get on her back and go for a submission victory. I predict this fight ending off either 3rd round submission victory in favor of Michelle Waterson, or 3 rounds to which Michelle Waterson wins via decision. If it were to go by decision, it would go by Michelle Waterson boxing Carla Esparza, keeping distance her way, making sure Esparza doesn't go for the clinch, or doesn't go for the double or single leg takedown. She has to go and distance herself from Esparza. The only way Esparza can win this fight, if she's like, okay, you know what, I don't care if I'm going to be clocked by Michelle Waterson's jabbing, I don't care if I'm going to be hit by uppercuts, I gotta get in there, I gotta close in the distance onto Waterson, I gotta go for a clinch, I gotta go for a single leg takedown, I gotta go for a double leg takedown, I gotta go and wear down and apply the pressure onto Waterson, because there's one thing Waterson isn't really good at, it's the fact that she gets overwhelmed easily when she's fighting somebody when fighting inside the pocket. And so, Carla Esparza can definitely defeat Michelle Waterson. But when you look at Michelle Waterson's superior boxing ability, her ability to throw in leg kicks, to which Carla Esparza, she has a tendency of struggling when it comes to defending kicks. When you look at Michelle Waterson's ground game, when you look at her jiu-jitsu game, when you look at her ability to go and submit people from her back, Michelle Waterson, once again, has the skills and has the tools to go and defeat Esparza. What I'm questioning, though, is her fight camp. Because Waterson versus Joanna, which is Waterson's last recent performance there, Waterson's coming off a loss compared to Esparza's 2 victories here. Waterson, for some reason, I have no clue, was going for high kicks. She was going for axe kicks. She was going in outside the pocket. She's doing outside the pocket boxing. Although she can do good in that, she's not better than Joanna Jędrzejczyk in that scenario, though. She was losing out in the 50-50 exchanges. She was pretty much being beat in the counter-fighting aspect of things. And in this fight, here's what I say. I think Esparza will be the one who will be pushing forward of the action. When it goes ring, 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 and these two fighters square off, I see Carla Esparza pressing forward, pressing the action like she should, and instead of being committed to pressing the action, Michelle Waterson, who does, I think, have a reach advantage over Esparza, is going to go throw in some leg kicks. She's going to go throw some leg kicks. She's going to throw some body kicks. She's going to go in and utilize her length, utilize her jabbing ability, because when you look at the jabs between Carla Esparza and Michelle Waterson, Michelle Waterson is a lot more free in her jabs. Is a lot more free. Carla Esparza looks tight. even in victory that Esparza has, her striking ability is very tight. She closes herself in, and she's really good at throwing uppercuts and haymakers, but when it comes to pressing forward the action, trying to press forward the action with a series of jabs, with a series of shots, trying to fight outside the pocket, she tends to struggle. So that's where I believe Waterson can win this fight here. I think it's going to be an upset victory for Waterson to go defeats Carla Esparza. But you know what? This fight could end in any way. For all we know, Esparza can go for a double leg takedown onto the second round for Michelle Waterson, do some ground and pound, and then go for a submission victory. Honestly, anything can happen in this fight, and that's why this fight is incredibly exciting for me. And so this is being reported in by BJPenn.com that Michelle Waterson plans to knock out Carla Esparza to put her in talks to fight for a belt. And here's the thing, if Michelle Waterson were to beat Joanna Jędrzejczyk that one time, then we could have seen Michelle Waterson versus Weili Zhang instead of Weili Zhang versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk. So it's not like these two fighters are outside the pocket or outside the rim. If either of these two fighters were to win, both of them could be slotted into fight against a top 5 fighter in the women's strawweight division. Michelle Waterson believes her UFC 249 fight against former champion Carla Esparza has title implications in the line. I have to say, I have been on a lot of cards. I headlined against Paige Van Zandt, headlined against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and was on the undercard of Khabib and Conor, which was insane. Waterson said on BJPenn.com, "You always think it can't be tough, but here it is. We are in a pandemic, but the UFC is continuing on and push forward, and I get to be part of that." When I think about it, I think about how this will be talked about in history. I'm excited to fight Carla, as we've been scheduled to fight since April. Michelle Waterson goes on to say that we always want to fight, and I want to fight someone that gets me closer to the title. I need to beat her to get closer to that title, she explained. It puts me in talks to fight for the belt. I'm not sure how Tatiana Suarez is doing with her injury, because Tatiana Suarez is ahead of her in the rankings, and I believe Nina Ansaroff is pregnant. There are not too many other girls at the top of the rankings. I am just one win away after this. That's the thing. Her bread and butter is her wrestling, but I have really good statistics with my wrestling and jiu-jitsu. If it hits on the ground, I'm 100% comfortable there, she said. The majority of my wins are by submission, so people who fight me have to think twice about going for the ground and pound. Carla has worked a lot on her kickboxing, and I think she'll stand and bang with me for a while. What's going to happen is she's going to get frustrated and try to take me down, which will get stuffed. She'll shoot at desperation and fall into submission or get knocked out. That is what I predict myself for the Michelle Waterson versus Carla Esparza fight. I can easily see Michelle Waterson can defeat Carla Esparza. It's whether or not it's about whether or not her camp or her trainers or cornermen are giving her good advice, unlike the advice that they gave her when she fought against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. But really, my money here is towards Michelle Waterson. As she said, she's perfectly capable of handling herself from the ground and in striking. So let's see what happens. There's the UFC. Anything could happen. For all I know, Carla Esparza can knock out Michelle Waterson with a right hook just 15 seconds in. That could potentially happen. I don't think so, but anything can happen in the UFC. You're listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast. Coming back right after the short break.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com health and wellness, or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And so we talked about Amanda Nunes versus Felicia Spencer being a major title fight coming up soon. We talked about Michelle Waterson and Carla Esparza being the only women's fight coming up this Saturday at UFC 249. But good news though, we got a plethora of women's fights coming up in the near future here. We got Courtney Casey versus Mero Barella added to May 16 UFC event. A flyweight bout has been added to the UFC scheduled event on May 16, which would be about next week. In a span of 8 days, the UFC is planning to host 3 events in Florida, UFC 249 on May 9, and currently unnamed events on May 13 and May 16. A flyweight fight between Courtney Casey and Mero Barella has been added to the May 16 events. After a 4-6 run in the Strawweight division from 2015 to 2019, Cast Iron Casey will moving up to 125 pounds in the UFC. Casey holds wins over Randa Marco, Jessica Aguilar, and Angela Hill. Elise Barella, who is 12-7, last competed in February, losing to a decision to Montana De La Rosa. She will look to snap a 2-fight lose streak. Another bout announced is Ciara Eubanks versus Sarah Moraz added to May 13 UFC event. Ciara Eubanks vs. Sarah Moraz was originally scheduled for UFC 249. However, after a schedule reshuffling amidst the pandemic, the bout has landed on the May 13 card, which is once again next week. Eubanks is 4-4, will to score her first win in the UFC's bantamweight division since moving up from 125 pounds in 2019. She holds octagon wins over Lauren Murphy and Roxanne Modafferi. Cheesecake Moraz is 6-5, last fought at UFC 242, defeating promotional newcomer Liana Hoha by third round TKO. Her resume includes UFC wins over Alexis Defresne and Ashley Evans Smith. Also, there is Mackenzie Dern versus Hannah Cifers targeted for UFC event on May 23rd. So, a strawweight matchup is in the works for an unnamed UFC event on May 23rd. The event does not currently have an official name or location. Mackenzie Dern was originally scheduled to face against Ariana Colonesi, is now in the works to meet Hannah Shockwave Cifers. A unanimous decision defeat to Amanda Ribas in October, the BJJ ace is 2-1 in the UFC with victories over Ashley Yoder and Amanda Cooper. Cifers, who is 10-4, is also looking to bounce back from defeat, having lost to Angela Hill in January. She is 2-2 in the UFC with victories over Polyana Viana and Jody Escobar. Another bout announced is Claudia Gadelha vs. Angela Hill added to UFC event on May 16. A strawweight matchup is in the works for a planned UFC event on May 16, and that event also does not have an official name or location. Once again, we can go guess it's going to be in Jacksonville, Florida. Former title challenger Claudia Gadelha, who is 17-4, is set to meet Angela Overkill Hill, who is 12-7. Claudia Gadelha will look to build off a unanimous decision victory over Randa Marcos at UFC 239. Since then, she's been scheduled to fight 3 times, but injury and opponent weight miss and the coronavirus have caused cancellation. Hill currently rides a 3-fight win streak. She last competed in February, winning a unanimous decision victory over Loma Lukbunmi. With all these fights being announced, one fighter that I'm very interested in as to why she's not being booked for a fight would be Jessica Andrade. This is coming in from MMA Junkie at usatoday.com. Jessica Andrade's week might have been a tad more hectic than the rest after flying over to the US, cutting weight, losing her opponent, then having the entire UFC 249 event being postponed. Former UFC Women's Strawweight Champion Jessica Andrade decided she might as well cheat on her diets. Jessica Andrade, who lives in Brazil, was scheduled to rematch fellow former champ Rose Namajunas on April 18 and was recently able to fly over to Las Vegas amid a global coronavirus pandemic. Shortly after arrival, it was announced that Namajunas has withdrawn from their fight due to coronavirus-related deaths in her family. Though no replacement was announced, Jessica Andrade continued to train and cut weight until the plug was officially pulled for UFC 249, and all upcoming events were suspended indefinitely. But Jessica Andrade was determined to get a bag anyway, and then it shows Jessica Andrade UFC at Jessica MMA Pro, It shows her and a fight crew getting a gigantic box or bag of McDonald's. And And she says at UFC, cancelado, and shows like a bunch of emojis with her winking, crying, and her with a smiley face with her tongue out. Jessica Andrade captured the UFC strawweight title from Nam Yunus last May, but lost it shortly after. Then she suffered a first-round stoppage loss to Weili Zhang in August. She was looking to position herself back in title contention with another win over Nam Yunus, but for now, it will have to wait then. So, Rose Namajunas being out of it, though, does create a hole. My condolences for Rose Namajunas. I hope Rose Namajunas in the past year has had it really rough. She was at one point on top of the world. There was a period of time where we would say who was the best women's fighter in the world, and we would say either Amanda Nunes or Rose Namajunas. And then it's been shifted. Sadly, it has been shifted now, where right now it's just Amanda Nunes, and her fight got moved over to the Felicia Spencer fight, being moved over to a different time. I would have loved Jessica Andrade versus Rose Namajunas, but because it's personal issues, you can't predict this stuff from happening. But I'm surprised here. There's a lot of I'm surprised myself that Jessica Andrade isn't throwing her name out there, because I just announced several fights that are happening. Michelle Waterson versus Carla Esparza is happening. Then at least one of those two fighters will be moving up in the rankings, and potentially, we could see either of those two fighters end up fighting Jessica Andrade in the future. Michelle Waterson has talked about it, that there right now kind of is a hole in the top 5 rankings, and the fact that Nina Ansaroff and Tatiana Suarez are unavailable. Joanna Jacek, she's unavailable for a while. Weili Zhang is unavailable for a while. So right now, and Rose Namajunas is gone, so the women's strawweight division right now is pretty much at a state of limbo. So the only thing you can do right now is only move up. Jessica Andrade is the only active competitor in the women's strawweight division who's active. When I mean active, as in I know she can be booked as soon in the next 3 to 5 months. That's what I'm saying, because I don't expect Weili Zhang to. I don't expect Weili Zhang to appear no less than December. Really, I really don't. And Joanna Jacek, she says she's gone for a while. Rose Namajunas, we don't know how long she's going to be gone. She's been gone. So Nina Ansaroff, she is pregnant. Tatiana Suarez, she's out with an injury right now. She's inactive. Jessica Ai, although she's in a different division, she can go slot herself into the women's strawweight division pretty easily. Jessica Ai, she's gone. And Felicia Spencer, she's waiting for her matchup. And if you look at all the other fighters below Felicia Spencer in the rankings to go and fight against Amanda Nunes, it's a very weak list. I'd say I say the women's bantamweight division has to be the most weakest division happening right now. Valentina Shevchenko, I'd love to see Valentina Shevchenko competes in the other women's strawweight divisions though, but that involves her cutting a lot more weight than she's already doing right now. And Valentina, she's a bit busy with her movie and through injuries, and she's also set up to fight against Joanne Calderwood, and Joanne Calderwood has no fight set up later, so the women's strawweight division now does have a hole. So I respect Michelle Waterson and Carla Esparza for throwing their name out there, being like, okay, so while all these other fighters, while they're out, and since we're not sure who for sure will be the next top contender here, it was gonna be Rose Namajunas or Jessica Andrade competing against Weili Zhang. I always said that the women's strawweight division, it's interchangeable of having Jessica Andrade, Weili Zhang, Joanna Jacek, Rose Namajunas. You can interchange those 4 fighters in any shape or way for the next 3 years, and it would constantly be exciting. It really is. But now that we have Esparza versus Michelle Waterson, even they recognize, hey, there's an opening there for us to go and put ourselves out there for possibly fighting for a title fight. Because let's say Esparza does win. And Joanna Jacek is still trying to recover from the fight, because the fight against Weili Zhang was very emotional, was very tough on Joanna. And so if Joanna is still out, if Rose Namajunas is still out, if Jessica Andrade is still like buying her time for something, I don't know, we could see Jessica Andrade versus Carla Esparza, then whoever wins that fight could go fight against Weili Zhang. Or if Jessica Andrade were to get injured, there's no other fighters available at that very moment other than possibly Michelle Waterson or Carla Esparza. So really, I respect these two fighters for working their way up. I respect fighters like Claudia Cadell and Angela Hill working their way up through the women's rankings. And who knows? Maybe from their victories in this fight, it's going to put them in good graces for the UFC, so they can be booked later for a better fight in the near future. So that's my 2 cents right now. Currently, when it comes to the standings of the women's division right now, it's currently in limbo, which is understandable considering the fact that, hey, the entire sports world is pretty much living in limbo here. We got sporting events being canceled. We got fighters saying they don't want to be in fights. You got some fighters being locked in airports. We got some fighters who can't even make the traveling. And also the fact that, considering the fact that Jessica Andrade currently lives in Brazil, we're unsure about international flight right now. Russia right now is going through a period of lockdown with their international flights. We don't know if Jessica Andrade will be able to travel from Brazil over to America without any complications happening. We're really unsure here. So right now, the future right now kind of is unknown in terms of the placements of fighters for the women's strawweight divisions. So coming up right after the short break here, we'll be covering some more women's MMA news right here, the GSMC MMA podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And welcome back here. You're listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast. This is being reported in from BloodyElbow.com. Chris Cyborg reflects on KO loss to Amanda Nunes. It kept flashing through my head. There's a fight inside your head every time you take a shower. The week after that fight was the difficult moments. And so, one of the most difficult moments of Chris Cyborg's career was when the Brazilian took a post-fight shower after her 51-second knockout loss to Amanda Nunes at UFC 232. Chris Cyborg, real name Cristiano Justino, says vivid images of the knockout kept flashing through her head every time she closed her eyes in the shower, and that she found herself in an internal battle for an entire week followed at fights. One side says something, the other said something else. Cyborg says, "The worst thing there is after you lose a fight is to take a shower," she told MMA Fighting in a recent interview. "You take a shower by yourself and that flash comes in your head all the time, and then you start to question yourself. There's a fight inside your head every time you take a shower. The week after the fight was a difficult moment." Cyborg was unable to negotiate a rematch with Nunes, and the 34-year-old decided to part ways with the UFC to sign with Bellator in May in 2019. Chris Cyborg captured the women's Bellator featherweight title in her promotional debut, scoring a 4th-round TKO victory over Julia Budd at Bellator 238 earlier this year. The multi-promotion MMA champ would like to make her boxing debut sometime later this year. Also, it was being reported on that Chris Cyborg was buying in for a cross-promotional fight for Chris Cyborg versus Amanda Nunes. It is very interesting to me because this isn't the first time. We have like somebody calling out like Nunes or someone calling out a champion, a women's champion in the UFC for a cross-promotional bout. There was discussion of having the women's champion go take on Weili Zhang. And in this scenario, though, I genuinely believe that the Amanda Nunes fight with versus Chris Cyborg pretty much completely altered how we perceive Chris Cyborg and Nunes now. There was a period in time where we would say who was the greatest women's fighter of all time. We would say Amanda Nunes, and then when Nunes got knocked out by Holly Holm, we then said Chris Cyborg, and now it's Amanda Nunes. What's going on with Chris Cyborg? One of my friend's sisters, so my sister and her friends, they're all in the army. In the army, they would go and do training. They would do some wrestling training. They do some boxing training. They do some grappling exchanges. They do some Muay Thai, some clinching, some jiu-jitsu there. It's mannered. They got to do some variation of mixed martial arts training against each other. And my sister would go on to say that her and all her female buddies in the army will go on to talk about how they loved Ronda Rousey, how they monitored their fighting style when they were to do some fighting training, to do some combat sports training in the army. similar to Ronda Rousey, like trying to go for the clinches, trying to go for some judo, trying to go for some takedowns, trying to go for some headlocks. They try to model themselves around her. And then after that, she's like, after Ronda Rousey got knocked out, it became, okay, now my sister and her army friends want to model their fighting style around Chris Cyborg. And so they got into boxing a lot. And then when Chris Cyborg got knocked out, now my sister doesn't even follow mixed martial arts anymore. Amanda Nunes, without a doubt, is easily the greatest women's fighter in the entire world. And let's not forget this. It wasn't just a couple of years ago we would have like Dana White and Joe Rogan go say that Chris Cyborg and Ronda Rousey could go toe to toe with like the heavyweight champions of the UFC, of the fight world. Can go on to go fight fighters like Floyd Mayweather in boxing, and Chris Cyborg has thrown her name out there for doing boxing. And it's very interesting. It really is. It's so interesting as a fight fan to see the evolution of women's mixed martial arts here, especially for specifically Chris Cyborg, because Chris Cyborg has changed her fighting style dramatically over the years, though. And when I look at Chris Cyborg in her performance against Amanda Nunes, one could say that Chris Cyborg, if this was maybe 3-4 years earlier, would have defeated Amanda Nunes at that moment, though. Yes, Chris Cyborg is still fairly young. She's still, I'd say, she's a little bit past her prime, but the way we look at Chris Cyborg now is very, very different after that loss, and the way we look at Amanda Nunes now is also incredibly different. These fights really get to people, and Cyborg is still pushing for a Nunes fight. Is still pushing for a Nunes rematch. She pushed for a Nunes rematch after she lost. Dana White didn't give it to her, though. I understand Dana White's perspective in that Chris Cyborg really didn't stand a chance against Nunes in that fight. Even though there are people who are like, oh man, you don't know who could win this fight. It could be Cyborg, it could be Amanda Nunes. But with the way how I saw Cyborg was fighting, she went from this like power hitter. She's very similar to like Francis Ngannou in the sense that she came in as this dangerous threat. She's always bigger than all of her matchups. She has insane punching power. She can knock out and destroy people in the first round. And then you see Chris Cyborg and how she fought against like Amanda Nunes, and how she fought against I think she did fight Nina Ansaroff. But it was in the fight to which she fought against Felicia Spencer, to which Spencer lost in that fight, and it was so Felicia Spencer fought against Chris Cyborg, but coming out of that fight, Felicia Spencer came out of it more of a winner than Cyborg, strangely enough, though. And it's because Chris Cyborg adjusted her style. She no longer became the power hitter. She now tried to push forward, being this like very technical boxer, very passive fighter, fighting. Even her stance is a lot less loose. It's a lot less loose, a lot less tight. She's aiming for a lot more jabs. She's going for a lot more leg kicks now. She's trying to apply a lot of these boxing mechanics towards her MMA. So she stopped going for for clinching. She stopped going for elbows. She stopped going for forearms. And now she's going for jabs. She's now going for hooks. She's now going for haymakers. She's doing a lot less clinching now. Chris Cyborg has adjusted her style so much that she's gone from the woman who can go and destroy everybody in the first round towards this really good MMA fighter, this really good boxer who can knock you out probably in the fourth round or could outscore you in the third round. Chris Cyborg has shifted a lot lately in the past couple of years here, and it's very interesting seeing how she's evolved herself. So we talked about her. So she talked about like her loss towards Amanda Nunes, and I talked about earlier about Amanda Nunes' withdrawal from UFC 249, and we can confirm it now. It is coming in also from BloodyElbow.com. The coach says ankle injury led to Amanda Nunes' withdrawal from UFC 249. Amanda had a small ankle injury. She preferred to stop and trade rather than running because we were at a stage where we didn't know what would happen. We didn't know if it would be May 9, where it was going to be. We had several questions and few answers. Silveira told Brazilian MMA outlet Combate in a recent interview. Silveira didn't give a timeline for Nunes' return, but now we know it's going to be later. It's going to be just in about a month's time. But said the UFC Women's Bantamweight Champion and featherweight title holder is looking to get back in the octagon ASAP. Now, this isn't the first time we've heard about Amanda Nunes dropping out of a fight because of an injury, though. If something does happen again, then we can expect Amanda Nunes withdrawing yet again for the second time against Felicia Spencer here. And so we talked about Chris Cyborg wanting to get in towards boxing, going towards something else that's beyond Bellator and the UFC. And she just posted herself doing this kickboxing event in Vegas. And if you look at how Chris Cyborg fought here, this is a couple years ago. If you look at how Chris Cyborg fought in a fight in this kickboxing video, she called herself the Grand Slam champ Chris Cyborg, and she fights so differently. She really does. The way how she fight, if you look at Chris Cyborg, she's throwing like spinning elbows. She's always aiming for the clinch. Clinch game at Chris Cyborg is one of the best in the entire UFC at one point. If she had a hold on you, man, she's going to go throw in some flying knees at you. She's going to throw in some elbows. She's going to go from forearms. She's going for some takedowns here. Chris Cyborg was a complete different phenomenon from all the other women's fighters that are happening at the time here. She fought very differently. She fought very aggressive. But now you look at her right now. She went from pressing forward the action, going for a leg kick, going for a clinch, going for an elbow, into I'm fine being stationary. I'm a counter fight. I'm gonna fight patiently. I'm gonna fight smart here, and it's understandable. Chris Cyborg now is she's going in her mid-30s, and she's fight. So I think she cares a lot more about the long term than she does right now. I think she's more invested on how can I keep my career going forward than I can, trying to prove that I'm the best in the world. Because I think right now she got humbled a lot from her fight with Amanda Nunes. I'm looking at this video here from Chris Cyborg in the fight in Las Vegas, man. She's throwing a whole lot of leg kicks, man. A whole lot of leg kicks, a whole lot of spinning kicks, a lot of body shots. She just went for a Superman punch. She's going for moves that she doesn't do anymore right now, fighting in Bellator and fighting the UFC. It's so mind-boggling how she shifted in just 40 years of fighting. It really is. And so you're listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast. Coming back right after the short break here, we'll be covering news here from former tough competitor here in Lauren Murphy, talking about her time in The Ultimate Fighter. Once again, you're listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast. Coming back right after this short break.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast. This is reported in from BloodyElbow.com. Headline: Lauren Murphy, Eddie Alvarez was unkind and degrading to women at Tough 26, The Ultimate Fighter, season number 26. 3 years may have passed, but Tough 26 Lauren Murphy still has resentments towards her former coach, Eddie Alvarez. UFC flyweight fighter Lauren Murphy had a lot of unpleasant things to say about her Tough 26 experience. Most of her grievances were towards her coach, former 155-pound champ, Eddie Alvarez. Lauren first aired out her gripes in late September of 2017, while the show was still airing. Alvarez responded not long after, stating it was Murphy who had the blank attitude, a really bad attitude. Almost 3 years have passed, and Murphy has begun to build a winning streak of her own. But her ill feelings towards her mentor on the show remains unchanged. Maybe I'll speak to him and just tell him to F you. Or F around, or F up. Murphy told of Alvarez on MMA Fighting's A Side live chat on Monday. Eddie was just a really bad coach, and I think maybe a part of that I did really wrong was I had my expectations set so high, she explained. I thought he was going to be this amazing coach, an amazing person, and Eddie's really just an athlete. He's not a coach, and he's not a good coach for sure. According to the 36-year-old Murphy, a lot of Alvarez's supposed abrasive actions happened when the cameras weren't rolling. Most of them were against female cast members, including those on his own team. There was a lot of things that happened on the Ultimate Fighter that didn't get aired, she said. There's a lot of things that don't get aired and that happened that I thought were really upsetting, that I thought were really disrespectful. He was really, really unkind to a lot of women on that show. Not just me, but a lot of the women, I just happened to be the only who would speak up or say anything about it. So that is the part that made it on air. One of the instances she recalled was when Alvarez paid a visit to their house one night, along with her friend who wasn't connected with the team in any way. He came to the house one night. 16 women living in a mansion, Murphy recounted, and he came to the house with a friend of his that wasn't even a coach on the show, just a random guy that none of us met. He got drunk with his friend in our house, watched fights that we weren't allowed to watch, and then left and never interacted with any of us. It was super disrespectful and bizarre. None of that stuff makes it on air, but those were the kind of things that were really upsetting to me. I just felt so disrespected. Murphy also detailed some Alvarez coaching methods on the show, which he said were degrading towards the female fighters. We had a list of all the women in the house, and we circled with a red marker, she recounted. He put a circle around the girls he thought he could win the show. He put a big red X through the faces of women he didn't thought had a chance. And Ariel, back parentheses, was one of those women. He put a big red X through her face, and he left that list sitting out for all of us to see. So she knew the whole season what he thought about her. Of course, she didn't want to go to practice with a guy like that who thought of her. She thought she had no chance and wasn't a good fighter. He treated us like we were all a bunch of jokes, like we were just stupid little girls with our stupid little game of our stupid little competition, Murphy added. He would be really degrading towards us. Eddie Alvarez left the UFC in 2018 and signed with Singapore's One Championship in a historic trade that had Ben Askren on board. He is currently 1-1 with the promotion, with his most recent win happened against former champion Edouard Forliang last August. Murphy, on the other hand, is on a 2-fight win streak. Her most recent victory happened against Andrea Lee at UFC 247 last February. She won via split decision. And so what do I think about this scenario here where Eddie Alvarez... I think it really is a case of... it's a case of miscommunication between the fighters and the coach. This has happened to me in my personal life and with other coworkers where there's this big miscommunication that you think you're being tough on somebody. You think you're being tough on somebody when you're kind of degrading them. Or we got this one person who thinks like Eddie Alvarez is being too tough or not being tough enough. It's just weird coaching theories, weird coaching philosophies. One way I looked at it was okay, so I'll compare it to NBA. I know it's a very different sports, NBA mixed martial arts. So there's a coach named Tyronn Lue, and the coach named Greg Popovich. So Greg Popovich is this well respected. I'll say Jerry Sloan. So Tyronn Lue, Greg Popovich, and Jerry Sloan. Greg Popovich and Jerry Sloan are respected. They are respected among their peers. But they're not liked among the younger demographic. And the reason for that is because they have a tendency of always yelling at their athletes. They're yelling, they're very strict, they have a no-nonsense attitude. They are incredibly tough on their NBA players to the point that it would make them very uncomfortable. And then you have a person like Tyronn Lue. Tyronn Lue pretty much is a pushover who has nothing to say. He has zero insights. He has nothing interesting that could make a team be better. If you were to talk to an NBA player, he would provide no insight, telling them, "Oh, you should do this, or you should work on your jump shot. You should work on your leg work." He wouldn't say anything. What Tyronn Lue was good at was he was good at being on the good side of the players. The players love Tyronn Lue, and one would say that the reason why the players love being around Tyronn Lue is because Tyronn Lue doesn't boss them around. He's a coach who's like, okay, LeBron, what do you want to do? Or hey, LeBron, what do you like? What's your play style? What do you want out of this? That's Tyronn Lue's play style. But he's not really all that respected. A lot of people would say Tyronn Lue is an awful, bad coach because he doesn't command respect. And the reason why I'm comparing Tyronn Lue, Greg Popovich, and Jerry Sloan with Eddie Alvarez is because the staffing and the actual athletes, there has to be communication between both ways. I'm pretty sure if Lauren Murphy were to have a different coach, like if you were to have like a Forrest Griffin or a Uriah Faber or an Eddie Alvarez, she would have a very different relationship with all three of those people because all three of them would have very different ways of being a coach. One coach I think about was one coach who I do believe is like absolutely awful was Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor was a glory hog on television, and he's like, "Hey man, Saul, you're the best!" Like he's just yelling the most nonsensical things ever. Uriah Faber was an awful coach. He gave one line to all his fighters: "Fight the hands, fight the hands, fight the hands." Like they were. Like I think we can commonly accept this. Most coaches in the older fighter are not really good coaches. That's why I think GSP is one of my favorite coaches in the Tough series, just because in the first episode he was like, "Okay, I'm not a good coach. I'll admit that right now. I am not that good in communicating with people. I really am not. I don't know how to be a good coach. I don't even know how to properly instruct people. And so, I'm gonna bring my coach in. I'm gonna be I'm just gonna be a figurehead coach. I'm gonna be actually the training partner for all, and I'll show them all the tricks, all the moves on what to do. But I'm not really gonna coach. I'll have my coaching team coach, and I'll be there helping out. Like GSP Primo was a glorified assistant coach during the season to which he was a coach. And that really was the best he could do. That was the best thing any fighter could do in a scenario if you're not a good coach. So, I look further into this, where it says, I was looking into like how Eddie Alvarez responded to this, and there's a post here that says, the 34-year-old Lauren Murphy was eliminated from the TUF 26 as early as the tournament's first round, losing via unanimous decision by Nico Montano, who went on to win this. In a recent interview, she spoke how she was jealous of the women who were trained by Alvarez's opposing coach, Justin Gaethje. I was definitely really resentful about it, and I was really very envious of the girls on Team Gaethje because they were allowed to have rest days whenever they wanted. And once again, that type of training varies between person to person. It varies. They were having a lot of fun on their team. It seemed that their coaches really treated them with a lot of respect, and I felt like I was getting the bad end of the deal here, having Eddie as a coach. And then Alvarez responded here saying, I understand you're there for yourself, but you didn't even fight anybody on the other team yet, Alvarez said. You didn't even get past your first fight against Team Gaethje, and you conspired 2 or 3 times already against the girls on our team that you're going to be in the gym with every day. So I'm like, man, this girl is a little bit on the head case. She's kind of looking at everyone as her enemy. It just didn't make a good attitude in the room or a good person to even have around. She was conspiring from the very beginning. So Alvarez says, hey, Lauren, you're conspiring against me. Lauren says, well, you're a bad coach. I think there's complete miscommunication here, and if these two were to talk it out, I think things would get better. I'm not going to blame anybody here. I say it's a little bit of both. I think if both parties communicated a lot more better, then the whole experience for the TUF would be a lot more better for everybody. And so coming up right after the short break here, and as customary, I'm going to end my podcast here with a quiz. I will test out your overall knowledge of mixed martial arts and the history of the UFC right here at the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, coming back right after this short break.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
And welcome back to the podcast here. So I got 2 quizzes here, and one of them is pretty hilarious, and the other one is testing your knowledge of Ronda Rousey. Yes, although Ronda Rousey to many people is kind of outdated, though, I still want to test your knowledge of her, and let's see how much of a fan are you of mixed martial arts, really, because there are bandwagon Ronda Rousey fans, and then there are knowledgeable MMA fans out there who know the history of Ronda Rousey before she became really big. So let's test your overall knowledge of UFC and mixed martial arts right now. But first, what kind of MMA fan are you? I got a questionnaire here, where depending on my answers, it's going to tell me what type of fan I am. Question number 1 here. Do you boo any of the fighters when you attend shows? Yes, I do. And so the responses here are yes, but only when they are boring. No, yes, but only when they act dumb. And when Colby Covington is out there, or Chael Sonnen, or Ben Askren, yes, I do boo them. If there's somebody who is a complete jerk, who fights like a jerk, then yeah, I'm gonna boo them, because that's the point of their character, right? Do you enjoy watching Randy Couture matches? Responses are, hell no, yes, or no, but I can appreciate it. And yes, I enjoy Randy Couture matches, man. They're fun. Is Matt Lindland a tool and a blank that got sweet karma from Terrell, but then acted like a tool and claimed it was the ref's choice to stop the fight like the boring blank he is? Wow, that is a very trivial one. I'm going to say no because I don't really know what was up with that. Do you even have the slightest hope and desire to see Sakuraba put down Vanderlei in their 4th fight? No! I don't have any interest in seeing Kazuchika Sakuraba fight anymore. Okay, so rankings here. Number 1, Vanderlei is greater than Randy Couture. Frank Mir is greater than Tim Sylvia. Team Quest equals boring. Fedor Emelianenko is better than everyone. Or Mark Coleman and Mark Coleman equal the legend. Which of these are true? This is such a weird... What kind of test is this? So which of these do I not agree with? I don't think Vanderlei is greater than Couture. Every UFC heavyweight champion is greater than Tim Sylvia. Team Quest, I don't really know about that. Fedor, better than everyone? No. Mark Coleman is a legend? Yes. Which of these is true? I am a firm believer that... Oh, yikes. The responses here are lame. Okay, the only one that I truly agree with, here is Mark Coleman is a legend. Do you wear a blue gi even though you are a blue belt, thus wearing blue belt on blue gi? So, okay, one of my friends trains with the blue gi, but trains with the white belt with like blue stripes. So, the responses here are very weird. I myself don't train with gis at all. I did amateur boxing, so we don't train with gis. Do you watch highlights at least once a day? I do watch UFC highlights once a day. I watch multiple highlights a day, really. I'm always trying to keep up with what's happening here. Have you ever spent $100 on a hoodie just because it has your favorite fighter's logo in it? I think I spent $20 on a dethroned Cain Velasquez shirt. That's the only piece of UFC merch I've ever bought. But no, I've never spent $100 on a UFC merch. Which of the following moments best symbolizes MMA to you? Vanderlei destroying Sakuraba or Mark Coleman falling off the ropes after winning the Grand Prix? None of these symbolize MMA to me. Neither of them do. Neither of them honestly do. So I'm just getting Mark Coleman falling off the ropes is one of the most funniest images ever. Is Kimbo Slice the greatest thing since sliced bread? What the flip is this? He's just some tool that fights that street fights. Give him an effing bread, he will own MMA. No, he sucks. I'm not gonna say he sucks. I'm not gonna say that he sucks. He sucks as an MMA fighter, but he's legit as a street fighter. But I don't want to call him a tool. Do I have to respond for that? I'll say, no, he sucks in MMA. Now I'm going to get my test results here. What kind of MMA fan are you? And the response here is, what? What? So there apparently were correct answers. This is coming in from allthetest.com, quiz 11. Named what kind of MMA fan are you? And the answer they gave me is, I'm a complete idiot that should be sterilized before I spread my defective dumb genes to the rest of the gene pool. I hope I die slowly, and I hope I die in a slow, painful death. Apparently, out of 450 people who took this quiz, the average answer here is 3 out of 10. So I'm part of the majority here that are complete idiots according to this quiz here. That's the most dumbest thing I've ever taken in my entire life. Yikes. Alright, next quiz here. How did Ronda Rousey do in the 2008 Beijing Olympics in women's judo? What medal did she win? She definitely did not win the silver or the gold medal, but she performed well, so she won the bronze medal. That is correct. Prior to joining the UFC, who did Ronda Rousey defeat to win the Strikeforce Women's Bantamweight title? Kat Zingano, Miesha Tate, Raquel Pennington, Sarah Kaufman. And the answer here is Miesha Tate. Miesha Tate will forever be known as the person who's lost continually to Ronda Rousey, sadly, because Miesha Tate is a really good fighter. What year was Ronda Rousey's first fight in the UFC? The answer here would be 2013. I guess 2014 was when she got incredibly big, but 2013 is when she made her debut. Who was Ronda Rousey's first opponent in the UFC? Was it Alexis Davis, Liz Camachi, Miesha Tate, or Sarah McMahon? The answer here is Liz Camachi. I can't say that name Camachi, but it was her first opponent. Which round did Ronda Rousey defeat Miesha Tate in UFC 168? Obviously, the answer is it's a third round. So this is before Ronda Rousey had a history of defeating opponents to the first round, though. She defeated Tate in the third round at UFC 168. Who did Ronda Rousey defeat in only 14 seconds at UFC 184? The answer here is Kat Zingano. I remember there's a lot of hype around Kat Zingano. My friends are talking about how Kat was really was one of their favorite fighters to watch, and he believed that she had a chance against Ronda Rousey. Didn't stand a chance. In theory, Kat Zingano stylistically was a great matchup against Ronda Rousey, but when it came in the actual moment, though, Ronda Rousey just did better. True or false? Ronda Rousey was the second ever UFC Women's Bantamweight Champion. I have to go say that is false. She was the first ever Women's Bantamweight Champion. Actually, the entire title was built around Ronda Rousey being successful. Who did Ronda Rousey coach during The Ultimate Fighter Season 18? Who did she coach? Oh, who did she coach against? Oh, easy. Miesha Tate. Yeah, Miesha Tate. Always polar opposite of Ronda. Who did Ronda Rousey pick up her financial UFC win against in 2015? Who did Ronda Rousey pick her final UFC win against in 2015? Okay, so the responses here are Beth Correa, Jessica Andrade, Juliana Pena, or Raquel Pennington. I think it's Pena or Raquel Pennington. I'm wrong here. It's Beth Correa, who was a fighter I don't think is active right now in the UFC. So yes. Final question: What was Ronda Rousey's UFC winning streak prior to losing to Holly Holm? What was Ronda Rousey's UFC winning streak prior to losing to Holly Holm? I gotta guess 7. Oh, no, actually it was 6. Man. So yeah, so I did fine right there in the quiz there. I got errors in a couple of them though. But yeah, if you didn't get all those questions right, then you're not a true Ronda Rousey fan, or you're a bandwagon Ronda Rousey fan, and you surprisingly liked her in the Fast movie, the Fast and Furious movie. She was. It really was. My sister, she still calls me, by the way, telling me how much she dislikes Ronda Rousey nowadays, because Ronda Rousey has one face, and when she performed for the WWE, she had that one face the entire time. She had one emotion, and we all know what face we're talking about. We're talking about the Ronda Rousey face, where she's like scowling at you. that was her default face their entire time in WWE, and that's what she's known for in the UFC also, sadly. Would I like to see her back in the Octagon? Definitely, but I like to see her when she's passionate about performing in the MMA Octagon yet again. So, that's it for today's quiz. That is it for today's podcast here. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps up. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Women's Mixed Martial Arts Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.